Well, I trust you've come to be built as His church, and your heart is open to receive His word, and we pray that it will be clear. Well, my little niece just had her first baby. My little niece, I say little because I remember her this age, crazy blonde hair, huge blue eyes, looking up at Sarah and saying, "You're not my mommy and you're not the boss." Real strong will at that point, as Sarah and I were just getting the hang of actually being married, and we're watching this young lady. We're all born that way, though, aren't we? We have a hard time being told what to do, especially if it's not the authority that we're used to. Even just this past week, I was sitting, it was raining, it had just rained, and I wasn't getting good reception in the office, so I started, I was on a phone call and I had to be outside, and so I sat down in one of the businesses in Forest Hills Gardens that was closed, not bothering anyone. I wasn't causing a commotion, and the security guard came and told me, "You have got to leave there. You cannot sit there." And something in me just didn't like that. Why? Right? It's not, I don't own that business. It's okay. He was right. I should, I guess, be sitting there. But something inside us just doesn't like being told what to do. I don't know what it is. And perhaps you're a little stronger in the independent side than others, right? Some of that's personality, some of that's the way we were raised. But as a whole, people do not necessarily like being told what to do. I think our culture, especially in the United States, is good at that, right? We the people. We're a representative republic. And if you tell us what to do, it better be things that we voted on and we approve to be told what to do. Or we have community boards, or we have apartment co-op boards. So if we're told what to do, I want representation there in being told what to do. We don't do well with kings. We throw the tea in the river, right? We say, we don't want this monarch stuff. But you know what? What's interesting here is we're finding that the relationship with God is a monarchy. It's not a representative republic. And we're told what to do. We're given a lot of things to do. And this sermon actually is that. The Sermon on the Mount is this special message to us in that way. And so I want us to kind of regather that for just a moment, because we just have one verse today, so I think we can have time for helping us see where we are in the Sermon on the Mount. I do really enjoy going verse by verse, phrase by phrase, even word by word, as we examine the flowers and look under the rocks and the trees in the Bible. But at times we got to zoom back out and see where we are on the big map. Okay? And so we do that. We don't do it each week, but we try to keep ourselves situated in where we are in Matthew, and especially in this sermon, because we didn't just sit down and listen to it for the last 3 hours. It's been all year. Okay? So the setting I'm going to say is a sermon by the sea. And here we are. Maybe they started out with this many. But by this time, Jesus is wrapping up. And you have hundreds, thousands perhaps, that have gathered on the seaside. Wouldn't that be awesome if we had that here? I don't know that we're going to continue to add to our number here by the end of this sermon, but that would be cool. Jesus is teaching, and there's that magnetic person that is bringing people from everywhere. This is toward the highlight of his teaching and his ministry experience. So this is before he started really proclaiming that he's ready to die and saying things that will make people run. And so we have him at the height of his teaching ministry. Sermon by the sea. You got bees, you got trees, you got flowers. Right? He's using all these images and illustrations along the way. The importance of this sermon. Well, it is very important. It's actually a matter of life or death. That's where he ends. If you listen to me, your life is spared. If you don't listen to me, you'll be destroyed. What authority that is. In fact, let's just take a moment. Look over there to Matthew chapter 7, verse 28. The very end of the sermon, when Jesus had finished these words, the crowds were amazed at his teaching. because he was so pithy? Not necessarily. He was very pithy. He was very engaging, but he was teaching them as one having authority. Who is this guy telling me what to do? Where is this authority coming from? Not the scribes that quote a footnote of a person who quoted another person who quoted finally the text. Well, here's someone who is teaching us as he knew what he was doing. And so the genre is that. It's preaching. It's definitely a sermon. We find illustrations, we find instructions, we find questions, we find repetition, but to be honest, it's a sermon. Jesus leaves us no wiggle room. I read through it this week again and just kind of put a little line under all the commands. Just the English commands. I didn't go to the Greek, just the English commands. 107 verses, over 50 commands, imperatives. That's not including a lot of other implied commands, things like, you have heard it that said, but I say unto you. That's not even including things like that, or blessed are the meek, which would be a command. This is preaching. It's not just, let's get together and talk about this. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to not do. But we're finding that this preaching is not just externals, is it? What is preaching of the heart, right? There's these internal things. And the Pharisees were all about the external preaching, but the heart Jesus is getting to. And so he's judging our hearts as he's really saying all is naked and bare before him. And so it's not just preaching, it's preaching from a king to his citizens who knows their heart. And that's fascinating. Kingdoms are all, like we think of this kingdom being along a river and an ocean that kind of shows where the kingdom is. But Jesus' kingdom isn't like that. It's in your heart and my heart, and that's the realm over which we've received Jesus as king, and we've started to apply these truths, these principles to ourselves because we've received him as king. And so it's preaching from a king to his kingdom, showing that your obedience is a heart issue. And of course, we know that he's going to help us obey. He's going to be the king, the Messiah that leads ahead of us like David, saying, let's go to battle together. He's going to be our warrior king that will help us. But he's still the king that tells us what to do. And it's not for us to say no, it's for us to say yes, to obey. All right, well, let's just get an overview of this. And I wish we could take more time with this, but this is really interesting. The way it begins and ends. Okay, what does it begin with? Matthew chapter 5. Who remembers what we begin with? This brief little section of what? Beatitudes. Good. The blessings. So it begins with a blessing here, and a better blessing. Blessed are you. Actually, go there. Matthew chapter 5. Go there. Blessed are you who are poor in spirit. Blessed are you who mourn. Blessed are you who are gentle. So he's saying, there's a real blessing for those of you who are coming into my kingdom. There's a great blessing for you who are coming into my kingdom. He ends with the same idea. Chapter 7 ends with a story. Anybody remember the story? It's the story of a foundation. There's those who build, the wise man builds his house upon the rock, and the foolish man builds his house upon the sand. So he's like, listen, you want life to do well. If you want to do well in life, if you want your community to prosper, what commentators say, this is about flourishing. If you want your community to flourish, if you want your life to flourish, this is how this happens. By living out my principles, by accepting me as your king in the heart and living these out from the heart. And as we know, in each case, it demands a heart change, receiving Jesus as Lord and Savior, so that he is living through us by being born again, this new birth, this heart change. But it begins and ends with this desire to be his king. Come on, you'll be blessed. You'll have a prosperous life. Follow me as your king. And in between are those 51 commands. There's really not a command at the end, and there's really not a command at the beginning, all those verses. But then there's these 51 commands that's kind of fleshing out his kingdom, his constitution, as it were, his Deuteronomy as we're entering this new realm, the new covenant of his word. And so I'm just dividing it here. We can't go into each of these. I think the outline's in front of you, but we're not going to go through all of that. Is it? We're on page, yes it is. Okay. Well, at least we'll get the blanks there. Page 7 really kind of gets into the breakdown, but we're not going to get into all that. It's a better blessing. There were these beatitudes and then pictures of this better blessing, salt and light. Secondly, a better law. You remember, you've heard it said, but I say unto you. Yeah. And it wasn't obeying just don't murder, it's don't hate. So that's this internal law. And then also the things you do. You're not fasting to be seen, but you're fasting in the heart. You're praying in the heart. So a better law. Number 4, a better livelihood. Living on earth as kingdom citizens. How do we do this? And so he talks about how do we deal with our wealth? How do we deal with worrying as citizens on earth, but also citizens of heaven? And then this is where we are right now. A better community, living with one another as kingdom citizens. And so we're told, do not judge one another. We're told to pray for one another. We're told the golden rule, treat one another as you would have yourself treated. And that's where we are, right in the middle there, in that section, right there. Do not judge. And so that's where we are. And then really the end of it is a better end, as he talks about how to become a citizen, and how to begin following him, and what that will look like for life and for eternity. So we've come to this point of do not judge one another. And last Sunday, we found this command, do not judge, has 2 big ideas. The idea of condemning, telling someone they're going to hell. And we realize that's Jesus' job, and all of that judgment has passed along to him. But then there's also this judgmentalism that often comes into our lives if we're not careful, where we need to be careful how we are deciding other people's standing, how they measure up. Remember, we use the tape measure. Jesus says, with what measure, you will be measured. And so as you are saying, that person, they just not towing the line right there. If that's you all the time, that's judgmentalism. The opposite is seeing where someone needs to grow and trying to help. Right? And that's encouraging. And so we're pulling completely away from judgmentalism, and we're moving into encouragement. So, don't judge, but you know what? Judge yourself. Get it right, and then encourage, help. But then this third point here that we didn't get to last time, because it's a contrast. Verse 6, this contrasting caution. Don't judge, but be discerning. Be careful. All right, let's say this week you meet someone at church, and you're at the back lobby, and they look at you a little wrong. And then they whisper something about how just kind of a little, like it's a derogatory about the way you look. And you're just like, oh, come on. You didn't need to say that. I know I don't look really good. You don't need to tell me that. All right, the next Sunday, you're just like, I'm not going to judge them, whatever, they had a hard day. Next Sunday they say, can I meet with you? And you go into the corner, and as you're talking, they take your wallet and your ring. And you're like, this is crazy. But they walk out fast. You're just like, I'm not going to judge them. Right? Okay, it's a hard time. They needed the money. They needed the ring. It's okay. I don't need it. It's okay. Next week, Tim, I got to talk to you. Okay, what do you need? And they say, can you put your hand out? This is the fellowship meal. There's tables there. You put your hand out. They're going to give you the ring back. They take out a hammer and smash your finger, and it breaks. All right, I'm not going to judge them, right? It's okay. I'm not going to be judgmental, right? Yeah, they just had a bad day. I'm happy to be their doormat, right? If they need to get rid of some anger, it was pent up. The hammer, that was a little much, but it's okay. The next week, right, They want to meet. You got the NYPD involved, right? I mean, really, there's some other things going to be happening before you meet with them again, and they slash your tires or they take your life. Something's wrong here. And so this is what Jesus is going to caution us, saying, don't be judgmental, but you know what? Let's be careful not to be naive. And so he's going to give a contrasting caution to this really forgiveness that should be free. And 70 times 7, that's the wording. In one day, 70 times 7. And yet, there's this caution. And as I mentioned in the prayer, talking to the Lord there, I have a hard time with this one. And so I want us to take a little bit of time and understand exactly what Jesus is saying here and how we apply it to our lives. Okay? So let's walk through this third point here that really talks about judging. Make decisions. Be careful. Be careful. This contrasting caution of judging. Do not give what is holy to dogs. Do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. The command is to show discernment. To show discernment. And I think we all understand the picture, perhaps. The picture is, first of all, do not give what is holy to the dogs. And so in both of these parallel phrases, there's what is really special and what is hated. And he's saying don't combine those two things. The first one is do not give what is holy to the dogs. And what is holy there is sacred. It's used throughout Matthew to talk about the Holy Spirit, the holy city, the holy temple. Right, so these things that we would respect, that we would revere, that we would make sure no one mistreated. Don't give what that is holy to the dogs. Don't give the holy thing to the dog. And I do think this is another cultural issue. How many of you have a dog? Right? Several? What? No one else has a dog? I have 3 right now. Anybody want a dog? All right, I got rid of 3. That's awesome. No, we're watching one, and then we have 2. We love pets. I think Forest Hills, perhaps per capita worldwide, takes care of their pets more than anyone else. Children of the world are treated much, much less to a lesser degree than many Forest Hills pets. We love our pets. That's not the idea here. We got to really throw that outside of our mind. When Jesus talks about a dog in their culture, and I love my pets. I love my dogs. But in their mind, what comes to mind is almost like what we think of coyotes, a pack of wild coyotes. But also picture in there fleas, mange, scabs, sores, flies. They come into your house and you're shooing them away because you want to protect your family. Right? That's the idea. Scavenging, hungry for food. Food is scarce there. Right? So people are not just feeding pets with their livelihood. And so these dogs become scavenging. And so like you let any little thing get there, they're after it. They're stealing it. And they run around in packs. This is the idea. And so whenever you see, almost every time you see dog in the Bible, it's very negative. Except for Lazarus. But that was showing how bad Lazarus had stooped. That the dogs were his Medicare. They were taking care of him. We've run into something of that here. How many of you seen the Forest Hills raccoon? Yeah, there is a huge one that wanders around the gardens like a bear. I mean, it is massive. It looks more like a bear. And it runs the town. No one's going up to it and trying to make it a pet. Right? That's the idea here. The idea is something you're scared of. You think it may give me rabies or some other disease. This is the idea that Jesus is saying. Don't give what is holy to the dogs. Now, there's a deeper meaning as well. The second one, actually, I do have an illustration of this. This is our Pepper, right? And she has some toys, right? But if it's a special animal, in fact, we do have lamb chop. I have a dog, You don't give a special stuffed animal to your dog because it's going to have a hard time, right? Even our pet will eat it up. Same with pigs. Don't throw your pearls before swine, right? Pearls would be the same thing as today, very valuable, coming from these Red Sea shells, right? And I don't know where we started this, but all the way back then, they would take these pearls out of the stomach, and it looks beautiful, and so we wear them around our neck. You may wear them around your neck, and it's a beautiful thing. Same thing in that day. Precious possession, your pearl. You're not going to throw that to the pigs. You're not going to throw your pearls to the pigs because they're going to see this as food, breadcrumbs, and they're not going to wear it as a necklace. They're going to just trample it. They're going to waste it. Worthless. They don't see the value of those pearls. Now, the pig in that culture had an idea as well. What would the pig be? What would trigger in their mind as they're listening to this when they think of pig? What do they think? Unclean, right? Yeah. This is not kosher. They're not thinking barbecue. They're thinking this is a hated animal in its uncleanness. So it's the opposite of holy. And the idea of pearl, too, would be used of nuggets of wisdom, special words, your pearls in that sense. So there's these two holy things that actually are more spiritual in nature. And then these other things are also used as spiritually in nature. And so what we're finding here is Jesus is giving us a spiritual principle. Not just be careful not to let your stuffed animal around with the dogs. That's not what he's saying. He's saying something much deeper. So let's look at the meaning here. Jesus is saying, be careful about giving what is special to you and holy spiritually to those who are not receiving it. There are things that are spiritually valuable. Our holiest of possessions, my walk with God, my testimony, my relationships with brothers and sisters at church, this gospel message. He's saying that is so special, you got to be careful when you give that. This is why I had a harder time with it. Like, when should I ever be careful about giving out the gospel? Well, this is what he's saying. Be careful about these truths. Now, I think he's talking about this with reference to principles or pearls of the gospel, and then also with people. We have to be careful. There are certain, as we know, there's milk and there's meat in the Bible. And some of these things will never be understood by non-Christians. And so those are things we talk about as a family. And we're not bringing out all these deep things to those who don't know Christ, or they may say, I have no clue what you're talking about, and find fault with the milk that will save them. But there's also an aspect of this that's people. This is what Jesus is talking about. That as you are reaching out, that there will be people who reject the pearl in such a way that you actually have to cut off the communication of the gospel. This is Matthew 13, verse 45. The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking fine pearls. Upon finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had, bought it. All right, so there's this pearl about the kingdom of God, and so of course you want everybody to know about it. But Jesus is saying, be careful. Some people are not going to receive your pearl. They'll actually reject you because of that pearl. They'll reject you because you're presenting that gospel message to them. When does that happen? There is I think there is a physical aspect to this, but Jesus is not. He's not honing in on that. He's already said if they slap you in the face, turn the other side of your face. So it's not just a physical thing where I was reaching out to this person, they were mean to me. That's not just it. there's a gospel part of this, that there are certain parts of the kingdom of God that are shut. And we leave them to God's children. This is very difficult. Well, I think it helps us to move on and see the reason for this. The reason for this. And for me, this was helpful. This knowing why Jesus is telling us this. Do not give what is holy to dogs. Do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them under their feet. The first reason to continue to hold the treasure and treasure it, but be careful as you open up the treasure to others, is because of futility of effort. They're just going to trample that under their feet. They're not ready. And if you present it all to them and they're not ready, it's just going to be trampled. They're going to distort it. They're going to twist it. They're going to actually hurt the gospel message that you're protecting and you're loving. So they're not going to receive it. They're not ready to receive it. Their eyes are blinded, and they're at the point where they're going to trample every time you bring it up. Every time you bring it up, it's going to be just a huge mess. And you're like, boy, I wish this Christmas I could just preach the gospel to my whole family. But you know that uncle, he's just going, he's going to make a huge mess of everything if you bring it up there. So you might need to close it for a more opportune time. That's what Jesus is saying. Are they actually going to, is this going to be a Pharaoh where he's going to cause more trouble for your gospel message with others? Acts 18 verses 5 through 8, if you're looking for a cross-reference, we see Paul doing this. When Silas and Timothy came down from Macedonia, Paul began devoting himself completely to the word. What does that mean? That means he's preaching, solemnly testifying to the Jews that Jesus was the Messiah. But when they resisted and blasphemed, he shook out his garments and said to them, "Your blood be on your own heads. I am clean. I'm going to go to the Gentiles." Right? So he received opposition, blasphemy, and so he's like, okay, I'm going to move on. But you know what? A little bit later, continue to read. Then he left there, went to the house of a man named Justus, a worshiper of God, whose house was next to the synagogue. Crispus, the leader of the synagogue, believed in the Lord with his household. And many of the Corinthians, when they heard, were believing and being baptized. Right? So it wasn't the time right then, but as he just went to the person who was receiving, this other group began to believe as well. I remember spending years with someone. His name is Michael. And there were times where I wondered if I was doing this, and I had to back off. Michael is an anti-missionary. He was a Jewish man who studied scriptures to debate Christians, or studied Isaiah 53 so that other Jewish people who were reading this and saying, this is Jesus, he would be able to convince them that it's not Jesus. And we sat down for years, at least once a month, and talked through Isaiah 53, talked through this, and he never, ever got close. I was like, am I? And he started coming to church. And see, that was the point. I had to say no. Because he tried to talk to other people. And there is the trampling. That's where he's trampling the gospel then. I still prayed for him. I loved him. He moved to Philly, got cancer, visited him, shared the gospel again. I don't believe he ever received. But I struggle with this. Like, what? I have a hard time with that. I don't know, Lord. How can I not share the message? It's when it becomes more harmful to the message to share it. Right? When they're trampling it. They're just trampling it. They're going to make it worse. And then this last one. Not only is it futile as they trample the gospel, but there's danger in the effort. And that's where it happened. It's like, no, you can't come if you're going to tell others against the gospel. That is the danger. They will turn and tear you to pieces. See, this is not a light thing. They're going to try to hinder you. They're going to try to harm you. They're going to try to hurt you. And again, it's not just a physical level. It's a spiritual level. He's talking on a spiritual level, not just a physical level. And I realize we are careful if someone's harming us emotionally, physically. You set up the barriers, and that's good. But most of us can take a little bit of yelling. Most of us can take an irate coworker. But spiritually, this is where it's negative. When that person turns on the gospel and tries to harm your good news, tries to say that is worthless, tries to reject the gospel that you are sending. So, if you're asking, should I continue to share? Well, are they trampling it? And then secondly, are they turning and rending you? Are they trying to trample your faith? If that is happening, then it's time to cut it off. And it's sad. It's very sad. It's not that we're judging them, but we're saying this is going to be more harmful. It's the Pharaoh's heart is going to become more hardened as I present the pearls of truth to them. But there's this very real principle throughout the whole Bible that this gospel message is so important that if a person is trying to harm it, then it would be better to hold on to the gospel than the person. I'm going to give you some verses on this. Let me encourage you to write these down. It's all over the Old Testament, right? It's called idol worship in the Old Testament. But let me just give you some of these New Testament principles. Actually, I think Paul is referring to this passage when he says in Philippians 3, 1-2, beware of the dogs. Beware of dogs. He's not talking about dogs. He says in the context, beware of dogs, beware of evil workers, beware of the false circumcision. There was a group that wanted to teach grace, grace, grace. You're saved by grace, but you know what? You need to start doing the works of the law in order for God to continue to like you. Right? These principles are the means through which you are saved. And Paul says, no, that is, beware of that teaching. Beware of dogs. Romans 16:17. Now I urge you, brethren, keep your eye on those who cause dissensions and hindrances contrary to the teaching you have learned. This is the end of Romans, the gospel. And turn away from them. Protect this gospel. It's so important. 2 John 10 and 11. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your house. Do not give him a greeting, for he who does participates in his evil deeds. 1 Timothy 6, verses 3-5. If anyone advocates a different teaching and does not agree with sound words, those of our Lord Jesus Christ, with the doctrine conforming to godliness, he's conceited and understands nothing. Galatians gets even more harsh. Galatians 1, 8 and 9. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to what we have preached to you, he is to be accursed. And so there's this judgment. Right? We just said don't judge, don't condemn. But Paul is saying, listen, if they're rejecting the gospel, there's this sense in which they're condemned already because they're rejecting the message of the gospel. And this is how your Bible ends. I testify to everyone who hears the words of this prophecy of this book, if anyone adds to them, God will add the plagues which are written in this book. If anyone takes away from these words, he will take away his part of the tree of life. You say, but they're so nice. They're so sweet. But if they're adding, right, the Quran or the Pearl of Great Price or the Book of Mormon or the Watchtower Society, say they're adding to the words of the book, the gospel. You say, beware of that. Beware of those things. The church is a pillar and support of the truth. And there are times where we have to say, it's closed. Unless you embrace it, right, and receive it. All are welcome to receive this message. We've gotten away from this teaching in the church. Not our church, but in churches as a rule, because we want to be nice. We want to be kind, but this is the kind thing to do. This is the nice thing to do. It is to support the truth. Do not be down together with unbelievers. What partnership has righteousness with lawlessness, fellowship with light and darkness? Where is the partnership between pigs and pearls? So beware, be careful. Let me just apply it this way, and then we'll close. I would say perhaps you have no one like this in your list. I don't know, maybe you do. I don't have anyone, personally, that on a personal level, I've shared the gospel enough to where I say they should be cut off. Even Michael. I just see Saul turn to Paul. Right? I see Nicodemus. I see so many skeptics, atheists, agnostics being saved, even in our circle here. I'm just like, you know what? Be very careful before you cross this line. But perhaps we could apply it this way. There are many voices out there that you are listening to that are doing the same thing. They're trying to trample the words of faith. And it may be your song choices. It may be your media choices. It may be your news media, right? That if all you do is listen, now you may be able to listen to it and not be affected at all, okay? And that's good. That's fine. But if it starts to turn and trample your gospel, if it starts to turn and change to where you are not thinking correctly about God and the gospel, that message is different. We know that. The message around you is always going to be different. But I would just say, beware of dogs. Right? That's not going to change. You're not going to be able to say, listen, radio, stop it. I remember my brother growing up, we were not allowed to listen to any music that was not like totally Peter Pan or something. And so he said, Tim, I can fix your radio. I can take out all that bad music, rock music, whatever. I still don't do this, okay, so whatever. But anyway, and he totally broke my radio. Right? He just took pieces out. He fixed it, right? It was true, but it didn't play anything. Perhaps it's time, I'm just going to throw this out there, perhaps you've been just listening so much to all these noises and voices that are distracting you from seeking first His kingdom, that it would be good to take a week off or 2 days off. I'm just not going to listen to these voices. It's not being crazy. It's not saying I'm going to go live on a mountain or go back to Mennonite. No, it's just say, you know what, let me just calm these voices down a little bit and see if they are affecting me in my worldview, my view of God, and what is true about me and my surroundings. I think my pastor used to do that, Pastor Bickle in Brooklyn. He would encourage us all to do a media fast for a week. You probably would do better with a media fast than a food fast. You'd probably gain more time, more energy, and more clear thinking if you tried that. Say, I can't do a week of that. Well, how about an hour? If you can't do an hour, then there's something really wrong. What about a day? And this is the principle. The principle is that there are trampling, and there's trying to tread you, and it's those who have a different idea, the pigs and the dogs in that culture, that different idea. Okay? But you have to engage with that. I'm not saying totally do that for good. You have to engage with the world in order to be a light. And so there's that opposite side of it. But I don't know that we talk about that enough, this side of it, of being in the world and not of the world. But let me end a different way here. Because, though this is true, and I'll be done in just a few minutes, just give me 2-3 minutes. What's the next verse? Because you might close off that person for a little bit, but you're not closing them off. Because you know what you're going to do? You're going to pray for them. That's verse 7. And that's more powerful than your words talking to them. You're going to talk to God about them. And I don't know if that's exactly what Jesus had in mind when he was talking about this, but I believe that's what the Spirit has in mind when he presents it to us this way. Yes, there's that person that's so hard that whenever you bring it to them, they're going to trample the truth and they're going to try to hurt you in the process. But seek first. But ask. keep asking, and you may need to stop asking them, but you can ask your Father in heaven. And so that's where the next verse goes, and that's what we'll look at next week. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you'll find. Knock, and it will be open to you. Which really, this verse 6 is a hinge, because he's saying, don't give to this person, but ask, and God will give. You see, you can't move the will of Pharaoh, but God can. And so we cannot leave this verse 6 in the idea that, okay, well, I could just give someone up. No, you can't. You go to a higher power and start praying every day. I love Mueller, prayed for people, 6 people, years, his whole life. Year. They began becoming Christian little by little, the last one after his death. That's where the power is. I'll just share one quick story. Tim Casey shares this from Dispatches from the Front about a little village in Liberia and his friend Dennis that he visits. Unbelievable. This place is called Malawi, the Mecca of spirit worship in all Liberia, a mountaintop town founded by a witch with such demon powers there that the presidents of Liberia would come and seek special powers and curses. This is true against their enemies. Animal and even human sacrifices were offered there. Tim says, if there were a gate to hell, Malawi was that gate. It was considered sacred ground. So debauched was the worship of the devil that shoes had to be removed before entering the gates of the town. It was a place of unspeakable evil and violent darkness. 2 years before Tim had been there, someone came from Malawi, from the mountain, heard the gospel of Jesus and believed. That man and Dennis, an evangelist there, began to pray. Right? There's anywhere where there's this idea of dogs, this idea of outcasts, it would be there. So what followed was a year of praying and fasting in preparation for the gospel assault on Malawi. Many tried to discourage them. Some of Dennis's friends begged him not to go. It's a death trap. Dennis fixed his heart on the Lord and not his fears. And over a year before him writing, they went up to the mountain in faith. What they found was amazing after the year of prayer. They were received by the elders who heard their witness for Christ. Our hearts and hands are open to you, even if you want to build a church here. When the village people heard that, they were so happy he began to dance with joy, given a place to worship the true God. They circled the hilltop with joyful dancing and singing. He said, I heard about this miracle from Dennis, but I was not prepared for what I saw when I reached the summit. There before me was the cross. The church building now stands on grounds once dedicated to Satan. A Christian lady named Kulba was the first to greet us. The marks of her transformed life could be seen on her beautiful countenance, her beautiful dress, and by shoes on her feet. Now she's a free woman walking over the ground that Satan long ago usurped, reclaimed for Christ. And so we can never stop at verse 6. Those are people, individuals that are precious to our heart, that God loves, that need special lengthening, maybe even years of prayer before the Lord. Let's pray. This is a serious message, and I think it's a serious warning to us. Not those of you who have received, but perhaps you've never received this message. And this is between you and God. I'm not going to embarrass you or point you out. And I don't know anyone's heart. I only know my heart, and my heart is so deceitful. But maybe you're watching online, and or maybe here today, and you say, well, I've been very religious, but I've never embraced the truth of this kingdom gospel. I've never made Jesus my king. Let me encourage you to do that. We'll talk about that in the weeks to come because Jesus talks about it in his sermon here. But I would encourage you to turn to him as Savior, to ask him to take all of the offenses you've ever done before God and just totally forgive them based on his beautiful, loving compassion. The fact that he died to pay the penalty on the cross for your sins. Would you embrace that as true? That there is this person, Jesus, who changes whole villages. But each person, right? Friday night I just met with 3 men in our house that were agnostic and skeptic who have now embraced the gospel of Jesus. He does it all the time. Would you embrace the gospel of Jesus? And I would like to apply this to ourselves. Maybe there's someone you'd say, you know what, they are so mean to me because I believe. Would you take a heightened interest in praying for them? Hey, Lord, I can't change them. I'm going to stop talking because it's making things worse. They're just trampling and now they want to hurt me. But I'm going to really start praying. Would you do that? And even in closing prayer, Pastor Andrew is going to ask you to pray for these folks that are on our hearts as unspokens. If you'd like to meet me in the back and give me a name or text me a name, I'll be able to pray for them as well. But in this closing moment, let's pray for them, okay?